Poisonrana.
Hello. Davie Portman here from Poisonrana. Happy Mother's Day to everyone who celebrates. I'm with someone who doesn't celebrate Mother's Day. We're not like Mr. T here at Poisonrana. Braden might be celebrating his mother, but we refuse. We refuse to celebrate mothers today because we are from the UK and Ireland, and we might have celebrated a couple of months ago. But you know what? Every day is Mother's Day. Love your mother. Love your mother. Hello, Neal. Our man Neal stepping in the hot seat today as Braden is hopefully whining and dining his mother today. But Neal, how are you?
I love my mama.
Yes.
Davie, every day, like you said. And also, like you said, for us in the UK and Ireland, it's I don't know why the Americans and the others don't do this. We have a perfectly sensible system where it changes wildly from one year to the next. Yeah. Usually in March, sometimes early March, sometimes late March. It's sort of tied into the Easter calendar for some probably historical reason. I believe it's like the fourth Sunday in Lent or something.
It's
wild
something like
that.
that. Yeah, I'm quite lucky because my mum was actually born on both Mother's Day and Stone Cold Steve Austin Day, March the 16th. So it's always a nice reminder when I know my mum's birthday's coming up. I'm like, Mother's Day is usually like the weekend before or after, so I don't fall in the trap of being like, oh shit, it's Mother's Day today.
Yeah.
Father's Day, no idea. I very much rely on Clinton and Hallmark and all them to remind me when that's coming about.
Same. It's like when it comes toward the end of the year, I used to do this. I don't always do it. I'll look up, right, when is Easter? Because that's often time off work as well.
Yeah.
When is Mother's Day? And when is Father's Day? Those are the ones which are like the fourth Sunday and whenever, those sorts of things. But to answer your question, I'm doing very well, Davie, this fine Sunday. How are you? Are you well rested?
It's kind of. It's been a very weird couple of weeks. As mentioned on like last week's show and stuff, I went to Mexico with my girlfriend and then came back and picked up some kind of bug, parasite, Mexican demon, chupacabra, whatever. I don't know, but was pretty sick and was off work for a whole additional week, which in a way, like it sucked being sick, but was quite a nice sort of like refresh. Holidays are great, but whenever I go on holiday, they're not necessarily relaxing because there's so much I want to do and see. So being able to have a week to just recover, watch some TV. I binge watch White Lotus, all 3 seasons. I've been reading a lot more than I usually do, which is nice. And then the weather's finally started to pick up here, but I go back to work and it's right in the middle of second round of the playoffs for the Maple Leafs. So work has been incredibly busy for that. Worked last night as well, which was a very late night. Didn't get home till about 5 a.m. and then had a whole WWE pay-per-view to watch before this show. So that's why we're starting a little later than usual today. And then I've got to shoot back to work because it's game 4 in the playoffs tonight. So go Leafs, go. Post wrestling, mate. Not be Leafs fans, but here at Poisonrana, we like a bit of positive energy, and it's been a long time. The drought is almost as long as England winning a major trophy, but you've got to believe. We still believe, and maybe this year is our year.
I enjoy Pollock's relentless negativity about the Leafs. I have to say it kind of because I enjoy how much it winds up Jesse and some of them were hardcore Leafs fans out there.
It's a very British attitude to have. I feel.
I think so.
It's like whatever happens. I always found this with someone like Tim Henman, and everyone would be like, "Tim Henman's so shit. He's a shit tennis player." I'm like, he's got to the semis of Wimbledon like 4 times and been knocked out by the eventual winner. Like he's top 3 in the world at one point. Like, wouldn't say shit. Like, can we just? Yes, winning is great, but like. You'd praise a bronze medal in the Olympics or whatever. So I always find it funny, such a defeatist attitude. But what can you expect from a man who murdered someone's Tamagotchi back in the day?
That's a very good point. Although they did put you over, Davie, personally this week. I don't know if you've listened to Ting Talk from this week, but they were discussing at one point physical fitness and the CN Tower climb having been missed this year.
Yes.
They were talking about you.
Bad timing. I do need to catch up on that show, but yes.
You're a machine. Way thinks you should be on Ninja Warrior. And
oh god, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, all I do is walk. I walk everywhere, and walking's great. You can listen to your podcast. I'm even a bit like Belle from Beauty and the Beast. I don't mind reading a book and going on a walk. I've got good periphery, so I can do that. But yeah, like so many people just like the car is the automatic option, and it doesn't always have to be the case. Walk up an escalator. You don't have to stand there. Like, life's too short. If escalators moved faster than a human being, maybe I stand on them. But I have way more interesting things to do with my life than just be stood stationary on a slow escalator, just wasting my life away. So walking's free, you know?
What a healthy attitude.
Yeah.
Plus, it gives you the sort of feeling that you're the Flash or something like that. It's the same with travelators in the airport. Walk briskly on one of those maps and you feel like you're
it's great. I like trying to overtake the people that are like stood on there. Like if I go on the regular ground, like just power walk and like losers. So yeah, I'm answering your question. I've had a coffee in me. I had such a bland diet from this sickness. So it's nice to finally be able to have a bit of caffeine back in my life. So that's getting me through today. And I'm sure a bit of sunshine and hopefully a Leafs win will power me through the rest of this day.
Excellent. Can you pinpoint what caused this? Just traveling or
I can't. There's not, we both ate pretty much the same stuff. The only thing kind of I did that she didn't was like swim in a cenote. So whether I picked up something in that, I really don't know. But to be honest, it could have even been something I ate once I got back home. But the last day was very little sleep. Like our last day was a little boozy, like, you know, indulge in tacos and tequila and pina coladas and the like. And then it was a long day of travel. We had, 3-4 hours sleep and then commuting to the airport. We had a connecting flight in Montreal and all that. So it was a pretty long, stressful day. So the first couple of days, it's just like, oh, I'm just tired and beaten up. And then you realize, hang on, there's something inside of me here that's not quite right. But they are continuing to do blood work to kind of see if there's anything lingering. But I feel pretty good now, which is good. So, and there's always, taking that time off, there's always a lot of wrestling still to catch up on. So yeah, I'm sure I'll be back to as normal as I ever am in a couple of days. So that's not bad.
Oh, you look well.
Yeah,
as ever, Davie.
Good stuff. Well, let's get into the news items and stuff today. We were going to start with our review of Backlash. However, just an hour or so before we started this stream, it was reported that Sabu has tragically passed away at age 60. Not much more kind of news coming out as of yet. I don't know if you've heard anything, sort of no cause of death or anything like that. But yeah, a bit of a shock seeing that he did just have his retirement match at WreslteMania weekend against Joey Janela. I think he was at some kind of like Hall of Fame or something just last week, and he's been publicly seen very recently. So big shock, Sabu. I'm sure John Pollock on Post Wrestling will have a big article obituary out about him very soon. But let's maybe talk about some memories and stuff to honor Sabu. Kind of what is your... I would say Braden and I are very much the same generation. And for me, Sabu is kind of the first meme wrestler in a way. Before meme was even really a word. remember those early days of like Napster, Winamax, LimeWire, those kind of things. And as a young wrestling fan, where suddenly you can find all this other stuff on the internet, I'd be typing in WWF, ECW, these kind of things. And it was always Sabu clips that you'd spend days on your parents' dial-up internet trying to download for a 30-second clip of Sabu doing a triple jump moonsault or crashing through multiple tables or covered in barbed wire. So I always think of him as that. That was my first introduction to him. But then, has had a long career. Like we've seen him obviously in WWE, the WWE ECW version, as well as all this stuff prior to ECW, as recently as AEW Dynamite, kind of randomly appearing on that just a year or so ago. So a name I feel has always been kind of talked about for a long, long time. But what are some of your thoughts of Sabu?
Yeah, he's really a figure that's in the consciousness of most wrestling fans. Even I think those of us who were kind of diehard World Wrestling Federation people. Now, Jordan's in the chat and he's kind of reminded me of my age, and because he said I was in my 40s when Tamagotchis were a thing, which is slight exaggeration, Jordan Goodman, and we'll have words later on. But when Sabu was at his height, I guess in the ECW years, I wasn't really watching ECW at that time, and I'm not actually certain that it was available for me to watch. I was old enough to be watching wrestling. I was certainly watching WWF on Sky, but I don't think ECW was really there for me to find.
I don't think it was in the UK, as far as I'm aware.
No. So the meme wrestler description kind of chimes with me too, because it's really after his glory years that, I've sort of picked up on everything from WCW, ECW, TNA, all of that kind of, was after the fact. I guess the most memorable match for me, and it's going to be no surprise for an awful lot of people, the Born to be Wired match with Terry Funk in 1997, which even for ECW, I think, was pretty brutal. And I have in mind to rewatch it if I can find it a little later on today. And I certainly remember matches with Rob Van Dam, Sandman, Cactus Jack, Taz, of course, and that probably speaks to some of his more controversial moments as well. We get into talking about Taz. Sabu was not a saint by any means, and outside of the ring, he got himself into trouble a few times, I think. And part of that is just, I'm a very forgiving person, if people apologize and, they sort of see the error of the race. I think Sabu is widely thought of fairly positively, but he did call Taz the N-word at one time and then didn't apologize for it. That was kind of surprising on more than one level, because Taz is white as
I only found out he wasn't about, when Hook showed up in AEW. I was like, hang on, what's going on here? Like a surprise to a lot of people. I'm pretty sure even B Detroit has said he thought he was a brother for the longest time.
And I think more recently than that, he got himself into a bit of bother. This is a few years ago now. It just shows you how quickly time passes. But when Renee joined the commentary team on Raw and became the first female sort of regular commentator, he said that she was the first who wasn't a F word, and I mean like the sort of F slur type word, and then like the shittiest apology for saying that, saying you're not an F word or something like that. But wrestlers who are past their prime, this is a disease, of just trying to keep yourself in the public eye through controversy. I don't hold it against them particularly. These guys aren't, they're not out there to kind of win friends and influence people. And if you're talking about influence, he certainly in ring was that, a bit of a trailblazer of the hardcore
I mean, absolutely. You saw so much of kind of his stuff and Rob Van Dam stuff being carried over into WWF with the whole hardcore division, and definitely sort of, moves being stolen and that kind of thing. And there's a lot of like Sabu's offense you would look at, you'd see all over the place today, but definitely at the time, I like remembering the first time I saw sort of that triple jump moonsault, the chair to the ropes. I was blown away with what I'm seeing. And obviously wrestling has moved on since then, but definitely an innovator. I kind of think to the Rob Van Dam feud, and like obviously his like tag team with him, and the subsequent matches are things that stick out in my head. Another match that Braden and I have talked about a couple of times is the Monsters Ball 4-way from TNA with Abyss, Jeff Hardy, and Rhino, which is just such a fun, quick car crash match. And that's even like, I mean, okay, that's 2005. I was like, oh, that's not too long ago. We're talking 20 years now, which is insane. But yeah, he managed to keep himself relevant even sort of post-retirement in a way, and would always get a pop, when showing up in AEW. As random as that was, like a Jericho Adam Cole feud isn't a feud that would spring to mind as calling the need for Sabu, but it did. And yeah, as we said, as recent as the Joey Janela match. So, and the fun and games of last year's WrestleMania weekend, just not showing up and being like, nah, I believe he was even in the same building and was like, oh, I don't want to take the elevator up to the next floor. So God bless him. I think Braden and I are going to honor his work the best we can with a best match ever in a week or so. So let us know your thoughts on Sabu. If you're a member of our Patreon, we'll be throwing that up, and it's probably one we will put out for free. So we'd love to hear all your thoughts and memories of Sabu, what your favorite matches are, favorite moments, etc.
A great candidate for a best match ever, because so many sort of phases of his career that you could choose from. You mentioned that TNA Monsters Ball match, which I had forgotten about, but you've reminded me of, which, of course, relatively recently, but again, 20 years ago, but long into his career. And it's wild to think that he was still at it.
Yeah.
Weeks ago. So yeah, I mean, it is
like 3 weeks ago, was it 4 weeks? It's like
less
so
than a month.
Recent. Yeah. And just kind of spooky timing as well with Dark Side of the Ring this week is going to be all about the original Sheik, who's the uncle of Sabu. So just weird coincidence there. So yes, Sabu, rest in peace.
Yes.
Just a little bit of housekeeping before we go into Backlash. This is Poisonrana. We go live every Sunday around 3 p.m. Eastern Time, live on YouTube and the audio stream, to talk about the whole week in pro wrestling. We cover WWE, AEW, and everything else going on in the world of wrestling. But we do also have a Patreon, patreon.com/Poisonrana, where we've got almost 600 shows now on that feed. It's only $5 a month. You can even get a little taster. Sign up for 1 month and cancel if you like. You'll get access to all those shows. I'm sure once you listen to us, you'll want to keep that subscription. But we have a lot going on. It was very recently WrestleMania. So we had a bunch of shows surrounding WrestleMania. We talked about WrestleMania 18. We talked about WrestleMania 9 with Triple H going into the Hall of Fame. We did a best match ever Triple H. And obviously there's a whole lot of John Cena news going on this year, with it being his last year as a professional wrestler. And we've been doing a series called The Champ Is Here, where each month we go through a title reign of John Cena. We recently did episode 8, which involved the very short reign coming from Elimination Chamber 2010, where Cena wins the title and is very quickly cashed in on, it's an unofficial cash-in, but I'm calling it a cash-in, by Batista. And later this month, we're going to be joined by Grapple's own Benno, as well as What Culture's Michael Hamflett, both from Benno and Hamflett in Your House. as we'll be talking about WreslteMania 9. About Champ is Here episode 9, which involves the WrestleMania match with Batista and John Cena, their subsequent I Quit match, as well as a fatal 4-way. So that's coming up later in the month. We also just reviewed NXT from May 22nd, 2014, the go home show for the very first NXT takeover. And we will be reviewing NXT takeover, which is actually the 11th anniversary of the show next week. Wow. So, go back. This is available on Netflix. All these NXT shows are on YouTube now in the vault. So great show to catch up on. Really interesting time in wrestling, 2014 NXT. It's really bubbling up as something very exciting. And I think for a lot of people around this 2014 to 2017, 18 period was kind of the hottest wrestling going on. So really enjoyable show we have there.
I was captivated by NXT at that point in time, from about the period that you've gotten to in wasNXT, sort of 2014 and the birth of TakeOver, right through the sort of for the next 4 years or so. It was, I thought the best wrestling around at that spell, because it's well before AEW, well before WWE, as sort of, it was in a bit of a rut at that time. And for a lot of people who prioritized the in-ring stuff, NXT was just tremendous. It was just, these people from PWG were coming in, and you could get it on the network every week. It was just tremendous.
It was so strange because it's a WWE product for the fans that are sick of WWE, which is very much how AEW was so successful in the first couple of years, where people were just fed up of the WWE product. But the fact it's a WWE produced show was just bizarre. This real kind of super indie feel, such a great time to look back on. But we don't just cover wrestling. We cover movies and other elements of pop culture as well. And we do have a tier for family members, for our world champion patrons. Neal himself is one of them. And you get to pick something for us to review. And we recently had brand new family member patron Sunil pick Big Trouble in Little China. So we talked all about this John Carpenter, Kurt Russell, fantastic, crazy, silly movie, which was a whole lot of fun. First time I saw this film, and had a great chat with Braden all about it. We've got so many other movie reviews on that feed as well. So if movies are your thing, go and check that out.
Yeah, you're talking to a very proud family member of the Up Next Patreon, and I'll be subjecting you guys to some sort of movie fairly shortly. I might. Braden's a massive Trekkie, a huge Star Trek fan, and I know that he really enjoyed Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan when I subjected him to that. So I'm thinking of another one of those, but maybe something a little more enjoyable for the two of you.
I feel Braden might be conveniently sick that day if you pick another Star Trek movie.
But I do want to recommend it to everybody who's listening, because particularly I will say, who among us can listen to every podcast out there? It's a tricky thing when you're juggling work and everything else, but there are certain things I simply won't miss. And one of them at the moment is The Champ is Here, and the amount of work, research, and dare I say love that is going into that Patreon show is really, really, really obvious.
I think it's a great companion piece for this whole run of John Cena this year, especially like we're going to get into Randy Orton and John Cena's last possible match. And obviously a lot of John Cena, Randy Orton matches have been talked about on this show, and we'll be getting to more down the line as well. But yeah, it's been really interesting to do. We did something similar, like a shorter version, but about Sting. Leading up to his retirement, we did a best match ever Sting. And I think it really gets you to appreciate the career. And sometimes I think as wrestling fans in the moment, you're caught up in bad booking and stuff like that. But often doing these kind of shows, it and being slightly removed, you get a appreciation for other things, and you're like finding, you know what, there are some good things here and little gems in this kind of maybe like very badly booked era. And I certainly think that Iron Man match between Randy and Cena was one of them, where I was genuinely surprised and really enjoyed that one. And I've talked to a few people who seem to be on the same page, and this could be a hot take to some people, but Randy versus John Cena Iron Man match, better than Shawn v. Brett.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, we also have stuff on this very feed, the free feed as well. I mentioned we cover other sorts of pop culture. We have B Detroit and John Siino, who cover Wattup Doe, which is a show covering wrestling, hip hop, video games, movies, TV shows. Those two have such awesome chemistry. I love listening to them. It's just like hanging out with two pals, chatting everything. And I'm often learning stuff about pop culture that I don't necessarily follow as well, but they do it in such an entertaining way. So a new episode of that dropped very recently. And speaking of John Siino, John Siino has been hosting for the last 5 or 6 years now, Shot in the Dark, which has been an awesome addition to our feed, where John covers everything in the world of pro wrestling that you might have missed, which involves you're like things like Ring of Honor, things like it started off with AEW Dark when AEW first started. I said, John, I know you watch Dark every week. How about you want to do a little review show about it? And we called it Shot in the Dark, and the name stuck. But John's recently had a bit of a promotion and going full-time at his job. And with all the reports he does for Post Wrestling, as well as Wattup Doe, Shot in the Dark has to take a little step back. So it's on an indefinite hiatus at this point. But I just want to give a lot of love and thanks to John Siino. And I'm sure a lot of you guys do as well, because keeping us educated with everything going on in pro wrestling. He was very much the cliff notes of the entire industry. So thank you, John Siino.
I absolutely co-sign that, because even though the show was 15 minutes or less, and I think pretty much every episode, he may have broken the format once or twice, I can't remember, but if he did, it was for a very good reason. The amount of and watching for a start and analysis that was packed into that 15 minutes. It's not that he's just sort of jettisoning a 15-minute podcast. It's the amount of time it took that was poured into that podcast. And I will miss it. Hopefully it comes back someday. We'll see.
Yeah. Hours of work going into that show, and we all really appreciate it. So pour one out for now for Shot in the Dark, and thank you, John Siino. Well, I think we should get into last night's WWE Backlash. I am very grateful to start with that. It was a WWE pay-per-view and not an AEW pay-per-view last night, because I think this clocked in at 2 hours, 45 minutes, and was very easy to watch this all in about 90 minutes today. Whereas AEW pay-per-views, they're 5 hours. There really isn't much you can skip on that. But, you know, with Wheatley vodka commercials and video packages and all that, quite a breeze to get through. Before we get into chat about Backlash, I know we've had you on like Rewind a SmackDown and stuff like that in the last few weeks, but where have you been with the WWE product kind of since WrestleMania and the build to this show? And what was your anticipation for Backlash?
My anticipation for Backlash was not high, and that was mostly because I felt WrestleMania was not on a par with 2024. And then going from that as a springboard, they only had 3 weeks to put together the next PLE. And on paper, it didn't grab me as being particularly exciting. I wasn't overly hyped for Cena Orton, which I knew would be, of course, the main event. And I thought Cena didn't really deliver a great deal in ring. at Mania. Plus, there was the whole angle part of it just didn't hit. It's been talked about an awful lot, but the sort of absence of The Rock and everything else, it just sort of felt like the Cena retirement run hadn't really hit home. So my expectation levels weren't great, but it over-delivered for me last night, possibly because, like you said, there was only about an hour and a half of wrestling in it, and I'm sort of chilling out, relaxing. In the meantime, I can just go to the toilet, grab something from the fridge in between the matches when they're doing all the endless video packages or commercials and things like that. So it was a very leisurely watch. And pretty much every match was better than I sort of thought it was going to be or had a right to be.
I like that word you use, leisurely, because that's kind of how I watch and enjoy WWE. It's I watch it kind of like you'd watch I don't know, football or whatever. Like it's the length thing is never a problem for me. Like I'd say like criticisms with SmackDown for me aren't the fact it's 3 hours long. It's the fact it's a bad show. People sit for 3 hours watching NFL, which has 12 minutes of actual play time. It's sitting down for 3 hour things isn't particularly unusual. And for me, I like coming home on a Monday and throwing on Raw and sort of chilling and cooking some dinner and, doing a little bit of work on my laptop and having Raw in the background. And when things pick up, I watch it and enjoy it. And I think that's how I best enjoy WWE, is as a leisurely viewer. Like I can follow a lot of the story stuff just by listening, and then when the matches are on, I watch the matches. So that's kind of how I watch it. And I agree. I thought Backlash was a leisurely watch. Having it this morning with my coffee and just skipping through it. Probably not an event I'm ever going to go back and rewatch unless someone picks it for a review one year. No matches I'd say I'm necessarily going to rewatch, apart from at the end of this year when we're going through this 17th John Cena title reign. But I thought was fine and it was fun. But I think WWE has definitely dropped since WreslteMania, and I am a little fearful for this John Cena reign, because I could see us in years' time being like, man, Cena had such a career, but what a whimper, and how we've wanted this heel turn for so long. And I just feel, obviously the stuff with The Rock threw a spanner in the works, but I don't think we can entirely blame things just on that either. I feel these promos would have been great 15 years ago, but today they just don't really work. I think this feud as well with Randy, it's been pretty much the same thing every week. It's Cena comes out, he shits on the audience, he gets RKO'd. And so for me, I've never particularly been a lover of their chemistry, Cena and Orton, but I did have a level of, nostalgia and last time ever and that kind of thing going into this. And how will this look with Randy as the babyface and Cena as the heel? So I was interested in it that way, but I haven't really enjoyed the build for it at all.
No, I agree. I've done quite a bit of SmackDown duty, as you mentioned, but while Away was on paternity leave, I was sort of drafted in for Friday nights, and that's where a lot of this build was taking place. And even on Randy's part, it just felt kind of out of character, out of the realms of reality, really, for Randy to sort of speak as the voice of the boys in the back, and how John Cena was kind of always a step above, a little kind of removed from the rest of them. He never invited any of the boys to his place and all that kind of thing. Whereas we're meant to believe that Randy was this incredible team player among his peers at that time, which of course, anybody who follows WWE knows, Randy was a complete nightmare backstage at that point in time. So that didn't really land either, and it kind of felt. I'm sharing your skepticism a wee bit about, at this point, still early days, but you only get one chance to do a big retirement run.
Yeah.
And the heel turn is just not working yet for me. There have been little moments where it seems to have clicked. But even last night, and we'll get to this probably in more detail a little later, what should have been a big heat-getting angle involving R-Truth was relegated to the press conference. And it was like, what are you doing? That for me should have been a big heat-seeking moment in front of a crowd, but that's getting the cart before the horse.
My worry is as well is if the material has been so repetitive on John Cena's end, and if that's already happening with Randy in the first feud, and where there is 25 years of history you can draw upon, and it's still very much the You People promo.
Yeah.
Is this all we're going to get? Like, because all these Cena appearances have been pretty much the same, and you could pretty much change them around and it would be the same story. So that's my worry. They're going to need to find more out of this moving forward. And maybe after we go through the show, we can sort of talk predictions of what we think the next match is for John Cena. Rest of the show, I think I definitely had intrigue in the Pat McAfee and Gunther match. It's kind of Pat seems to be the new Shane McMahon in a way, where you can throw out in these kind of things. And I usually have fun with those sort of matches. I think Lyra Valkyria is starting to step up a bit. I've seen people very negative on this Becky heel run, but I'm enjoying it so far, and it probably had the most interest for me for like match quality. And then I think the US title and the Intercontinental title really felt like this could be on a Raw or a SmackDown. Both these things didn't necessarily feel PLE worthy.
Agreed. Yeah. And on the Becky point, I'll just chip in and say that I didn't think the heel return got off to a fabulous start. The kind of, it was me who attacked Bayley, ha 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 sort of thing. Was just like, okay. But the feud with Lyra has really stepped up, I think, in the last, and it really is only been going a couple of weeks, but I think they built this match really well. They captivated the crowd. It was easily the best wrestling match on the show by a distance, I think. And I think that Lyra's in-ring chops were very much on display last night. Becky showed very little signs of ring rust, and she has been gone a while, So I was very impressed with that match, and particularly by Lyra, who just played a sort of underdog babyface really, really well. I was slightly surprised by the result. I sort of felt, okay, this feud will probably run for a bit and might well start with Lyra losing the title and then being in the chase in that role. But I liked what they did last night. I thought it was a really good retention. I still think the feud will continue because we got the beat down afterwards.
Yeah. I think Lyra's had a hard job as well because her wrestling's great, but she hasn't necessarily connected with this audience, particularly apart from kind of doing the bird noise on her entrance. And then against one of the most popular wrestlers in, the last 20 years, and Becky Lynch, where we know what these WWE audiences like, and that's stars and entrances. And despite Becky being a heel, I think a lot of them were still going to be cheering Becky over Lyra because they know who Becky is. And so Lyra had a difficult job, but I think it's been a good thing because I think it's pulling stuff out of her that we really haven't seen in her entire run in WWE, including NXT. But let's start with the first match of the show, which was Jacob Fatu defending his US Championship against Damian Priest, Drew McIntyre, and LA Knight. As I said, I think this felt like a bit of a SmackDown match. We've seen them all have the singles matches in the last few weeks, and but I think in execution, I thought it was a pretty fun opener. I'd say I enjoyed this more than I did Drew and Priest at Mania, I think. I feel all four of these guys, you've got Jacob Fatu, who is very much a big project and is going to be a big star moving forwards. And then I get the sense like the other three are all these guys who might have a bit of a chip on their shoulder as well. They flirted so much, all three of them, with the main event scene, but are definitely in this tier just below your Ortons and Punks and Romans and Seths and all that. So I think they kind of have a lot to prove as well. And I thought you saw this in the match. I thought it was a pretty fun four-way. I think Jacob Fatu just keeps on getting over as a bigger and bigger star. Everything, his presentation, he's got one of the few good Def Rebel themes, I think, and his entrance with the fire and everything is just so badass. But you also had the introduction of Jeff Cobb, who seems to be brought in by Solo Sikoa. I managed to catch a little bit of the press conference, and Jacob Fatu kind of saying he didn't know anything about that. But yeah, get the sense that poor Solo seems to be falling further and further behind, and Jeff Cobb might be his surrogate here for a feud against Fatu. But that sounds awesome if that's the direction we're going, Jacob Fatu versus Jeff Cobb down the line. But overall, what were your feelings of the match and Jeff Cobb's introduction into WWE?
Much like yours, Davey, this four-way could have been a Raw main event, but I think knowing that it's a PLE, there's 17,000 odd people there, they did bring it. I think it was largely a decent match, but kind of was there on the card as an introduction for Jeff Cobb in the end, and I agree with you also that Cobb, Fatu seems like a direction that they'll probably wind up going in. I don't know whether Priest and Drew McIntyre are just going to continue feuding after this, but I don't know where they go. They were kind of almost hived off into their own little universe for the conclusion of the match from their point of view, which was the big bump off the equipment cases. And just as an aside, I think that they overshot the table a tiny bit, or at least Drew did. It looked like he had a slightly rough landing. And Triple H at the press conference mentioned, I think he said everybody was fine, but that Drew might have lost a tooth or something like that. So hopefully he's okay. But when I did rewatch that bump, basically Drew's head and shoulders are beyond the table, which is not a wonderful way to land from that kind of height. So I don't know what's next for those two, because I love Drew and I think he should be in the main event scene, but I suppose you can't be all the time.
And with a heel champion at the moment, I don't think, unless you have Drew turn babyface again, I don't see that happening for a while. I see this feud continuing between Drew and Priest. You had, Priest costing Drew once again in this match, and I imagine they're both going to be involved in the Money in the Bank ladder match next month, and you could have Priest cost Drew again, and maybe this is a big SmackDown main event to blow off the feud after Money in the Bank. But I definitely see those two still tied together, and I'm excited to see what Jeff Cobb does in WWE. He's what, Hawaiian, so that's essentially Samoa, right, in WWE guys.
Anywhere in the Pacific Ocean.
He's a cousin, the Hawaiian cousin or whatever of them, I'm sure. But I think Cobb and Fatu down the line sounds pretty awesome. We then move forward to Lyra Valkyria versus Becky Lynch, which we have already talked about a little bit, but I thought, as you said, the best match on the show, like wrestling match on the show. Lyra it's interesting because I think the US title, the women's US title, has been very much used as like a character piece, a character prop. Whereas the IC title, and I remember saying this to Wei when I filled in on Rewind Raw a while ago, I feel this is just slowly trying to get over as the work rate title in the women's division. And Lyra's eventually going to get over on that rather than mic skills and stuff. And I do think that's slowly happening. And I think a match against Becky is going to really help elevate you and build you up a level. They had a great match in NXT last year, and I thought this was a great follow-up. And I kind of like that the story now is Lyra is 2-0 on Becky Lynch, and she's the one who has Becky's number. But yeah, any more thoughts about this match? Just
again to emphasize, like, Lyra's reminded me how good she is in the ring. Here, I'll echo what you said earlier on about the character piece is still kind of missing, and that's difficult. It's hard to. I don't want to put all the blame on the performer herself, because creatively, what are they really giving her to work off of? Kind of wings, the call.
She's a bird. Yeah,
her finisher's named after kind of, has got the word wing in it. Is it? It's there's not enough. There's not an awful lot there to base a really compelling promo off. So this feud will help in the long term. But she did really impress me, and she actually had me. And I'm an old cynic, but the bump off the turnbuckle, and it was a turnbuckle that didn't have the pad removed. She was clutching at her nose even during the pin and after the match, and the guys on the desk were saying that they think she might have broken her nose, and I was fully bought into that. I was actually looking for some swelling and stuff after the match, but I think it was just really good selling. She's very good in the ring, and I think if she can get that next piece, and Becky will help her, I think, to get there, then she's off to the races. I agree with you too about the utilage of this title compared with the women's US.
I feel she's someone who could really benefit. Remember those NXT Prime targets where I think something like that will help her out so much, and could have been used for this feud. Not everyone would have seen that NXT match, but a prime target showing, Lyra back home in Dublin, like photos of her as like young Lyra in training, looking up to Becky Lynch, clips from NXT UK, clips from NXT, the feud with Becky and NXT, like those kind of things, I think would have got her over more as a character, not just this bird thing, which it's fine for an entrance. It's fine for like naming your moves after it and stuff like that. But we need to know more about the person. And I think when someone isn't necessarily a flashy promo, like she's not your, LA Knight with quick one-liners or that kind of thing. She's just a girl who's a really good wrestler, and she needs something for us to connect to. And I think those kind of pieces would help out a lot. But Becky is the right opponent because she's going to draw stuff out of her. And I thought she did on Raw this week as well. And this match I thoroughly enjoyed. This seemed to be the week of roll-up pins. You had Matt Jackson pinning Swerve with the roll-up. You had, was it Roxanne? EO pinning Roxanne with the roll-up. And I think even in the Fraxium match, if I remember correctly, as well on SmackDown. So, yeah, it seems to be a little trope that they've enjoyed this week all across the board in wrestling. We then had Dominic Mysterio versus Penta for the Intercontinental Championship. This was a match I believe we did see a few weeks ago on TV. And
the Raw after Mania, they did the rematch,
And then we had the obviously the multi-man match at WreslteMania. Lot of interference, Judgment Day stuff, and then leading to El Grande Americano helping Dom get the victory here. This could have been on Raw. I think that there was nothing that particularly stood out to me. I kind of want just to get to the split of the Judgment Day now at this point. I think there could be, I think people want to cheer Dominic now. And I think you should just lean in that direction and just go with it now. Because I thought this match was pretty skippable, to be honest.
Yeah. I think of the five, it's probably most people, if they're on a 5-star scale or something, this would probably be on the lower end of the 5 matches. But it was okay. Dominic's getting better in the ring all the time, and that's good to see. But we could see that on television. It doesn't need to be on a PLE. The Grande Americano interference, to hand him the victory, felt quite televisual rather than I don't really know where he fits in with the Judgment Day. I mean, that's a really weird kind of combination.
Yeah, I was thinking, are they going to tease him as a member? But I think it's more so just him feuding with Penta. You know, it's his Lucha thing more so than aligning with the Judgment Day.
Agreed. I think it's the Lucha thing, and they're trying to find something for that character because of the injury to Rey. You know, because that was supposed to be the match at Mania. Then Mysterio got injured, so he was subbed in by Phoenix, and so I felt that they were maybe going to culminate the Americano unmasking, you know, at Mania, have Rey beat him and unmask him or whatever, or maybe just let it continue beyond that. But either way, a creative feel a wee bit stuck with what to do with El Grande Americano now. He's just sort of the guy who goes after real luchadors, and he'll get his comeuppance in the end. But I can't say I'm super compelled by that storyline with Chad and the sort of, you know, the metal plate under the mask and all of that. It just feels it's a bit too goofy to be actively what's the word I'm searching for? Sort of objectionable or anything like that, you know. Although I do know somebody in the post wrestling Discord who doesn't like it at all. You know, doesn't like this Gulf of Mexico thing. Thinks it's a wee bit MAGA adjacent. But I feel it's just a bit too silly to be offended by myself. But who am I to make that judgment?
I'm with you. I'm like, again, like, who am I to make that judgment? I don't personally think they've stepped over that line with it. I just think it's a little bit of fun, but the Rey thing has definitely shaken things up a bit because I think Rey is the missing piece in this story, leading to a mask v mask match down the line or something like that. But Rey is going to be out for a while, so who are you going to pivot to? So he does feel like a little bit in a limbo right now. And yeah, like, do you see this Finn turn on Dom happening soon, or are they just going to keep stretching this out until SummerSlam or whatever?
I really hope it's sooner than SummerSlam.
Yeah.
This Judgment Day thing has been treading water for what feels like months at this point. It may not be that long, but it feels like it.
Yeah.
Well before WrestleMania. And Judgment Day as a grouping, you know, and Liv is off filming at the moment. It just feels kind of stagnant at the minute, particularly the hangers on, if you like. No disrespect to Carlito, but like, I mean, I'm not really sure what he's bringing to this to the party at the moment.
I really don't get why he is in WWE right now. Like,
neither do I.
He never wrestles, and I don't think he's not like your R-Truth who can get away with just backstage things. I actually think a lot of his backstage stuff and acting is pretty awful.
Exactly.
So yeah. I really don't know what he has to offer apart from numbers in the group. It's very odd to me.
The comedic stuff is very try hard and very unfunny compared with someone like R-Truth who, like you said, you know, gets away with it and is sort of beloved by the audience. Don't think that really goes for Carlito.
Yeah, Jack Wannon in the chat saying respect to Carlito for finessing a WWE paycheck, though.
100%.
Learning from the Good Brothers, clearly. Just we then go forward to Gunther versus Pat McAfee. I'm someone who has definitely been enjoying this. I've been really enjoying Pat's promos. I think he sounded great, and I think a lot of people in the company should look at him on how to cut a compelling promo and how to get the fans behind you. I think Gunther's been awesome in this as well. I think Michael Cole's been awesome. Like, I'm so happy for Michael Cole. He was someone that I always liked more than others, and it was clear that, you know, Vince being in his ear has just held him back. I remember that Beast in the East show where Vince apparently wasn't there, and he just seemed so free on that show and was so enjoyable to listen to. And now that the crowd really like respect him and love him as well, I think it's really helped make this whole story quite compelling. And I was a little let down with the match, though. I was expecting a much more brutal beatdown of Pat McAfee than we got. And I kind of felt the same with the Jey Uso feud at Mania. I found it so strange that we did a blood angle on Raw with Jimmy and then got nowhere near to that level of violence in the actual match. And I felt Pat just needed to take way more of a beating here. And I didn't even think his hope spots towards the end were like viable enough. I didn't bite on them as much as I thought we could. So I was a little let down here. And I think the, Gunther giving respect to Pat and Michael Cole at the end of the match, if this was, and I know blood isn't always going to be used and very rarely in WWE, but if this was just a Pat McAfee who was on the brink of death and it took Gunther everything, and it's like Pat isn't a wrestler, but just the will of, proving something to this guy, I think that respect would have meant a lot more at the end. So yeah, this definitely disappointed me. What about you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, yeah, I'm totally in agreement. But there's been few people who've benefited more from Vince's departure than Michael Cole, and I do remember that Beast in the East special when he was sort of off the leash, so to speak. And also the other one that sticks in my mind is around 2015, the UK Championship tournament, when it was him and Nigel. Yeah. And clearly Vince was not involved in that at all. It was very marked, those couple of events where Cole didn't have Vince producing him, that, there's a freedom there, there's a joy in it that he's really found these days, and I think that's great. The match, was not wonderful and not wonderfully laid out, to your point, because I didn't expect Pat to have like a 5-star classic, particularly since he's not been in the ring for so long. He's had serviceable matches in WWE in the past, but given his schedule, with a 3-hour YouTube show to do every day, and I had no real expectations that he'd been down at the PC laying out some sort of really fantastic match here. But even taking all of that into account, I feel like he should have been beaten. The hell should have been beaten out of him here. And he got just too much. Even at the end, he's still, like, he's on his feet by the end of the match. And really, I think him being stretchered out would have been a better finish to that. I half wondered before last night whether this whole thing was going to be a way of writing him off TV to concentrate on some other commitments for a little while. But I know college football isn't happening, and the sort of things he's normally needs to take time off from Raw or aren't happening. So that was just a point of curiosity for me about why this was all happening in the first place, whether he was going to be written off. Clearly not. So I'm with you on that score, that I think it would have been better had Pat been like brutalized.
Yeah.
By Gunther. I did enjoy the limited physicality that Cole got involved in.
That was the most interesting part of the match, I think, was the Cole involvement, and that's when the crowd really picked up on it, and especially that near fall, like the suplex from the apron into the ring with Cole holding the feet. I thought that was a pretty good spot.
It was.
I feel like, as you said, not expecting a 5-star classic or like from Pat McAfee, but there's something I like about, and that's why I tend to enjoy Shane McMahon's matches, and I feel it's how Pat should wrestle. They should wrestle like if we were in the ring. It's like, what can I do? Okay, I could hit a DDT, I can stick and move with some punches, and I'm going to climb to the top and do a splash, or I might be able to pull off a front flip, that kind of thing. And I think that's how these people should wrestle. Like, you don't want to see Pat McAfee going out there as Zack Sabre Jr. because it kind of shows up your actual wrestlers a bit. Yeah. But trying to get fluky moments, like, that's how you tell the story. And I didn't necessarily think they did that enough. However, I do think it was an effective story as a way to kind of keep Gunther relevant outside of the title picture. I think that was smart to do that. And from that point of view, I think it was effective of, not having you necessarily think like, oh God, what is Gunther doing now that he's not a champion? But I was expecting a Goldberg appearance, perhaps. So whether we're gonna get that, I could definitely see that for if the Saudi show happens next month. But thought this feud could be kind of a way to get Goldberg involved, but no Goldberg.
That's a really good point. I'd forgotten about Goldberg at this point, and wasn't expecting it. Therefore, it would have been very interesting had he turned up. But yes, that now seems something for SummerSlam. It feels like, and I guess they would need to at least start to tease a build
or a bill. And then we go to our main event: John Cena versus Randy Orton for, I think they're calling it the Undisputed WWE Championship now. Like this version of this title has had like 6 different names, and I really can't keep up with it. I think this is the one. That's what I'm going with anyway.
That's what I'm going with too, Davey. It has had a few names. It started life with an incredibly long name once
the Undisputed Universal WWE World Heavyweight Champion, I think.
Yeah. WWE's website is now listing it as the Undisputed WWE Championship. And so if I'm writing for the site or writing up a match, that's what I'm calling it.
Okay.
The site being postwrestling.com. And I'll even just say WWE Championship for a shorthand on occasion.
Lots of spamming of finishers, kickouts, hot crowd for it. And then we had a lot of ref bumps towards the end, low blows, title shots, table bumps. I have a feeling the wrestlers hate these new reinforced announce tables where Cena just bumped off of it. It didn't break. And then about 2 minutes later, we see it's half falling apart. Randy's trying to pick up bits and it looks like it's screwed into the actual floor. And he's just like, for fuck's sake, let's just get another table out. And then, as you mentioned earlier, the R-Truth involvement as well. I kind of got into this one as much as I don't think there was a hope in hell that Randy was going to walk out of this as champion. Seeing this for one last time, I was kind of all for it and was kind of going to give this one the benefit of the doubt. And I actually thought it was better than that. I think this is the best Cena's looked for a while. Like he was actually wrestling and doing a bit more than kind of the just walking around and chatting shit like he did at Mania. This is no classic, but I would maybe actually put this above some of their matches from earlier in their career. But a lot of bells and whistles, a lot of shenanigans going on. But overall, I personally quite enjoyed this. How did you feel?
I think the fact that these guys have met, I don't know how many times, how many dozen or scores of times, this was never going to be the worst encounter between the two of them because there've been some stinkers and there's been some really, really good ones. So there was that going for it. I felt, I would say the build we've already touched on, not wonderful. The heel run, not wonderful, but let's concentrate on the match itself. First 10 minutes or so, I was like, it was playing into my worst expectations because everything was so incredibly slow. The exchange of headlocks and the sort of, playing to the theatrics to the crowd. The crowd were very into it, and that's great, But as a television product or a streaming product, that doesn't always work. So the first sort of portion of the match, they can't do this for 20 odd minutes, please, And so I'm happy to see ref bumps and table spots and belt shots and low blows and distractions.
It needs it,
because it needs it. This is how you book Cena and Orton in 2025, and maybe it was overdone. That could be argued. I think Way and John talked about this last night a little bit. And took slightly different, had slightly different takes. And I think John was not as keen on this match as Way was. I think I'm more in your camp that it really needed the bells and whistles. Some of it's a little bit eye rolling, when you get to the 4th ref bump and then all of a sudden management think it's time to check on Eddie Arango, I think it was, who took the belt shot to the head. And in fairness, Barrett is doing his best to sort of say, well, he took a very hard knock to the head. It's no wonder that.
I mean, to be fair, these refs are down for about 10 minutes when just being knocked into. So a belt shot should mean death. So
pretty much, yeah. I mean, Chad Patton took 2 bumps. Like the first one was just the sort of being backed into one where he's down for a little while. The second one on the outside, like that took him out for the whole rest of the match until he ended up like Lazarus coming in at the very end to count 3 for Orton. And some of that is a bit of an eye roll, but you know what? It's what this match kind of needed, I think. Jack's in the chat saying all the best Cena Orton matches are overbooked. And
yeah, from that point of view, that brings me to something I wish they recreated, and that was, that Iron Man match with Randy trying to blow up Cena with the pyro. I think we could have had more callbacks in this feud.
Yeah.
I think, like, if it was Cena this time trying to blow up Randy, I think that would have been cool. Or even the amount of times Randy Orton has slapped John Cena's dad or things like that. If we could have got Bob Orton involved somehow or something like that, roles reversed, just play the old classics from their feuds, but with Cena now doing it to Orton, I think would have made this way more entertaining than you people, you booed me and I'm gonna take this title forever. Like I thought there was way more fun you could have had with this, but I definitely wasn't down on this match. I had some fun with it. Now, R-Truth is, I feel, going to be a fairly big part in this Cena story, and I've heard a few people, my roommate being one of them, who thinks that it should be R-Truth who eventually manages Cena to turn babyface down the line. What do you think of that? Like, is Truth he's got to get the shit beaten out of him at some point, but I kind of like the idea of R-Truth being the one who eventually, like, wakes up the old John Cena.
I like that idea as well. And I think with the current roster, who better really to fulfill that role? And I do think also, given there's a long way to go to the end of the year, I don't think we want Cena to finish, to hang up the boots as a heel. I think he will, whether they have a long-term plan or not. It doesn't really feel like it at the moment, but I sense that, the best thing is a proper send-off, a last night where it's hustle, loyalty, respect, and love for this man. And you can't do that in this current persona. So I guess who better than R-Truth to pull that out of him. But I think, sorry, Davey, last night's usage of R-Truth, and I don't know if you've seen this.
I haven't seen the post show yet. No, if you can.
Okay, was not great.
Okay,
kind of felt like they shot their bolt a little bit with R-Truth. What happened was Levesque is in the middle of his shoot press conference. He's going over the numbers. He gave the attendance. He said it was the highest grossing domestic Backlash, which is, of course,
of course it is,
a lot of work because they were in Paris last year and all of that. But he's in the middle of an answer on the use of celebrities to a member of the media. And John Cena walks in and speaks in Triple H's ear. And so they're back in storyline mode. Triple H gets up from the desk and says, I've got to hand over to the champ at this point. Cena sits down and says to the media, do you know, I don't think I've been giving the media its proper place. I'm paraphrasing all this. I don't have the quote. The media its proper place in, getting across what it is we do in previous press conferences. So with that in mind, I'd like to open it up to a question. And what felt like a very planted question was like, what was it like stepping into the ring with Orton for the last time? Did you exchange any words with him afterwards? He doesn't even get to answer this question before R-Truth appears. and starts speaking to him and says, I just want you to know, it was all very hokey. I just, especially in this, picture of the scene at the desk with the fixed camera and there's no audience, I just want you to know, John, that I still think you're the greatest and I love you and you're my childhood hero and everything. Even if people are saying that you're over the hill and can't wrestle anymore. And Cena just goes, very slowly, looks angry, turns around to R-Truth, and he said, in a moment that made me laugh, said, Ron, that was over the line. And if you say one more word, there will be consequences.
Right, okay.
So R-Truth opens his mouth to say, that's as far as he gets before Cena hoists him up and AAs him through the press conference desk.
Okay.
And walks off, and that's the press conference over. They cut back to the post-show panel, Jackie and Big E and so on.
Yeah.
And they just go home. They say, let's go home. It's
interesting.
Can't follow that. Long way of describing it. So, but it just didn't, to me, land, particularly on a post-show where you have a limited audience. Most people have gone.
Yeah, you want a big beatdown in front of a crowd and really get that reaction, right?
Yeah. So the AA to R-Truth through the press conference table, something to my mind they really should have saved to do in front of an audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, maybe we'll get a follow-up beatdown on Raw or something, but yeah, it's going to be, Jack says in the chat, the most interesting thing about the entire run is how they're going to convincingly turn him back face, which is true because I'm completely with you. I think that last show, whether it's in, like the rumor is an actual John Cena branded PLE, I assume in Boston or something like that, or MSG maybe, but you want him coming out as classic John Cena. You want the big feel-good moment, and really you want him babyface before that event. But this story doesn't lend itself to that. The story is he's going to hold this title right to his last day and then walk away with it. So it is difficult. Like, I can't see like this story doesn't lend itself for him losing the title at like SummerSlam or Survivor Series or whatever before that event. But really, I feel for the character to get him to that babyface position, you need to have him drop it and turn back. So I'm very curious what they're going to do with that. And actually, I don't have too much faith with the way things have been going this year that they're going to necessarily execute it effectively.
They're not off to a great start, are they, with that? I think we're in agreement as what the end game needs to be with Cena. It needs to be a night of love for the man, at the end, and he has to be babyface for that. And to get there, I don't know what you do, but I have a somewhat of a dread that Mr. Dwayne Johnson himself will want to insert himself into that storytelling in some way. Whether it's, I just feel that this run it'll be surprising if we get to the end of it without The Rock getting involved in some way or other. And I hope that, they come up with something a lot better than the run up to Mania for that.
Were you a Twin Peaks fan?
Yes.
And did you watch season 3?
I watched it the whole way through. Now my interest levels went up and down throughout the run, but I've revisited it since then. I've got a kind of a revisionist opinion on it and whatnot. But
I feel like this John Cena is the evil Bob possessed Dale Cooper.
Okay.
And just have him wake up one day and be like, oh, I'm a good guy again. I'm not possessed.
Do you know what? It crossed my mind that it's good. There almost needs to be a kind of a, hey guys, I didn't really mean any of that shit earlier in the year.
Yeah, turns out I've had a concussion the last few months.
Yeah.
And my I've been on some wacky meds or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting is they're still teasing that punt. I feel we are going to get that down the line, and whether the punt is what can knock some sense into Cena, we didn't get that in this match. I also thought it was a shame because I think the punt kind of with Randy, it being his story since like the Kevin Owens one, is bringing that move back. That was something that maybe hurt the Pat McAfee match a little bit, because we had that in his NXT days. That was his finisher, was the punt, because he was the punter, right? So it meant you took that away from him in that match as well. But I'd be curious to see when that comes out. And I assume Cena is the guy who will eventually take that. Now, coming out of this, what direction do you see? We had another RKO to Nick Aldis. Are we going anywhere with Randy and Aldis down the line? And who do you see Cena's next opponent being?
I'll start with Cena. I'll start with the last question first, because I am at a loss as to where they go next with Cena. There really doesn't seem to be an obvious candidate. Now, they did the angle with Truth at the press conference. I think it was meant to look a lot more sort of serious. It came off looking incredibly goofy. Ron, I was giggling throughout most of it. I think it was meant to seem like the most heelish thing he could do. I don't know how you follow that up. Like you said, maybe another beatdown on Raw. We've got Saturday night's main event coming up, and I don't know if we've only got one match confirmed for that. But
what's being confirmed for that?
Let me just check, because I've already forgotten, and it was me who wrote the story, which is very embarrassing. But Jey Uso defending the World Heavyweight title against Logan Paul.
Oh, okay, right, that makes sense.
So that, and I wrote that less than a few hours later. I'd forgotten already. So that's the only match that's booked for Saturday night's main event. But I'd be sort of surprised if Cena doesn't make it onto that big NBC/Peacock television presentation. So it might be something for him there, perhaps with R-Truth. I'm not sure. Looking broader into the roster, there isn't really a next man up, if you know what I mean, to sort of either talk sense into him, or
it looks like I think he's advertised for that Saturday night's main event and Money in the Bank. So
yeah.
I really don't know where you go with him. There's no one. I mean, I assume we'll get a Cody match down the line, but I see that maybe being the final match for Cena.
Mm-hmm.
I see whether you do Punk for Money in the Bank.
Some people mentioned Punk because there's the obvious, and
but
Money
also,
in the Bank.
Would you save that for SummerSlam? Like, you've got 2 nights in a stadium, and I feel as much as the it's poetic storytelling, Money in the Bank being such an iconic moment for them both and doing it that way, but Cena and Punk really lends itself to a stadium, I think.
I think so too. I also feel that Punk is busy at the minute, and it's not that far off Money in the Bank, and it would feel like you need to almost pull him out of his current storyline to do that.
Especially with those two on the mic, like Punk is going to be able to bring out way more from Cena than Randy did, sort of mic wise. And I think there's a lot more interesting stuff you can have where you can have a 6-week build to that match rather than just a tight turnaround with Money in the Bank. And Seth still seems pretty tied up with Seth right now. I really
agree also that when they do get to Punk and Cena, it should have a long build, and it can take one. And I think Punk can hopefully get something, because he's, whatever you think about CM Punk, and I have mixed feelings on the man as a personality, he is one of the best on the mic.
Oh yeah.
And can really carry a build. And so that feud, when they get to it, is one that can really stand a much longer period than between now and Money in the Bank. So yeah, I think SummerSlam is a more likely candidate for that.
Yeah, I mean, you can have Cena appear on these shows, doesn't necessarily mean he's wrestling. Like, I don't see him wrestling at Saturday night's main event. But I mean, do you just do R-Truth as a match? Like, it
could be like just another angle with him, at SNME, and go from there. I don't know. I mean,
they don't need to worry about pay-per-view buys, do they? So, and maybe the actual if you have a world title match and the Money in the Bank matches themselves, maybe you don't need a big caliber opponent, and you could do an R-Truth and more of an angle sort of thing with it.
Someone coming to Truth's rescue who is going to be perhaps next up for a proper feud. Yeah. But it's been such a spotty run so far. It's hard to be optimistic about, them really hitting a home run with the next feud.
Yeah, really, like this should be the most interesting thing right now in WWE. And I find the stuff going on Raw way more compelling. The Punk stuff, the Seth stuff, even the Jey Uso stuff. I do think I see Seth getting that title from Jey Uso very soon, whether it's we have an actual match between the two at Money in the Bank, or whether Seth could even win that Money in the Bank and cash in that same night or something. But I do think that title needs to go on Seth. And you can just have, with a 2-month reign for Jey Uso, I don't think he necessarily needs more than that. And in a way, like, it's better almost him losing the title and having that babyface trying to crawl back to that position to keep this crowd, rather than a title reign overstaying its welcome and people getting tired of Jey Uso.
I've got mixed feelings about it. I feel like they've done a good job with the heavyweight title and giving people decent runs with it to sort of establish it. But at the same time, it wouldn't hurt Jey in the least. And in fact, it'll endear him more to the crowd as an underdog, as a chaser, perhaps. He's so over at the moment that the loss of that title, it's really just, he doesn't need it, is the short way of saying it.
And finally, any thoughts on the Randy Nick Aldis stuff?
I would really like to see Randy Aldis, and we know that Nick is not medically retired or anything like that. As far as I know, when he was signed, he did an interview where he said, he'll see what happens as far as the in-ring stuff goes, but there's no real limitations on that. He's clearly he's a big man. He's clearly still hitting the gym and training. Yeah. So I'd like to see it. I think it's a foregone conclusion though, because to a lot of the WWE audience, he's the GM. He's the authority figure. They don't really.
He's never wrestled in WWE. Yeah, he's had his TNA stuff and NWA stuff, but he's never been an in-ring character in WWE. No.
So how they get there would be interesting. I think they would have to, with the TNA tie-in, they can certainly sort of show some footage there and build him up a little bit.
Both are baby faces as well, essentially. So it's That's not true. Like it's a heel GM getting RKO'd, and it's not like it's a heel wrestler picking on the babyface GM. So that dynamic's a bit weird, but
it is weird
too many times at this point to not go somewhere with it. Whether Aldis brings in someone to face Orton on his behalf, or I'm not particularly a big fan of Nick Aldis's wrestling, but I've got some intrigue in that match. I think just the novelty of him stepping in, like putting on the boots again and going up against Randy would be compelling.
I would like to see. And I think that, he's eaten so many RKOs, at this point, and he's also sold a little bit with the fury of it all, being very angry, and sort of the tease that he might, take matters into his own hands. That I feel that they're at least sort of dangling it out there as a possibility.
Yeah. Well, any final thoughts on WWE before we talk a little bit of AEW?
Not really. There's not much to report really from SmackDown. I think that although there were a lot of talent on there that didn't make last night, but that's typical for one of these WWE PLEs at the moment, where there are only 5 matches. Charlotte continues to get an awful lot of heat on SmackDown. I thought SmackDown has both. Last week was terrible. This week was a little bit better, and I'm absolutely with John Pollock in saying that these weeks can't go by fast enough until we get back to a nice tight 2-hour Friday Night SmackDown. I think
I don't know how much that's going to help though, because I mean, yes, you're not sitting through 3 hours of boring stuff, but the fact is it's still boring stuff. Like there's nothing particularly compelling on SmackDown right now. I did enjoy Fraxium Street Profits and a surprising win there. I thought that was really good. And I think the tag division is maybe the most interesting thing going on SmackDown right now. But yeah, there just needs to be some more exciting stories, and yeah, it just feels very bland and very by numbers at the moment. And hopefully the draft can shake up some things and make this show a bit more interesting.
Yeah. I do think it going back to 2 hours will help though, because the roster had never been really altered or expanded for a 3-hour show.
No.
So that hasn't helped. It would cut out the full entrances and an awful lot of the kind of filler stuff. So I think if they could get it a little just more pacey, that will help even with even if they don't switch things up too much with the roster.
Yeah. Well, let's move over to some AEW Dynamite. I really enjoyed Dynamite this week. I thought it was a really solid show. I absolutely loved this opening segment with Hangman Page. I think wrestling is a weird thing because I think I really appreciate subtleties in storytelling, and I don't think we need our hand held through every single story to explicitly tell us what's going on. But I did think this Hangman promo that basically sums up everything, his whole story since losing the title, not mentioning CM Punk here, but kind of alluding to, the shit that was going on there, as well as tying that into Swerve and the house invasion and all that, and going through the trauma which essentially turned him into a bad guy and taking it out on people, and then these fans just sticking by him and pulling him out the other side. I thought Hangman was great. I think his performances are so strong, and I appreciate good acting in wrestling. It's something I harp on about a lot. I don't understand why there's no acting coaches at the PC. Sorry, all due respect to Norman Smiley, but he shouldn't be teaching people how to act. You should, if wrestling is becoming more of a TV show, more of a soap opera, you need proper acting coaches teaching these people how to act, in my opinion. And I just think Hangman is so believable, so compelling, and so fresh. This didn't feel like necessarily a wrestling promo. It was just a guy kind of bearing his soul. And I thought it was awesome and led into the Ospreay confrontation really well, with Ospreay as the babyface being like, I appreciate that. I appreciate everything you've gone through. And yes, story-wise, it kind of makes sense for you to redeem yourself and win at this cup and win it all in. But this ain't going to happen because I need that, and I will be that, and I'll prove that I'm the best in the world. I thought it set up this match brilliantly as a babyface versus babyface. I'm really torn as well with which direction they choose to go, because Hangman wasn't really kind of in my thoughts to win the Owen and go to All In. I think we've been going, okay, is this story building up to Darby eventually coming back and beating Moxley? Because that was the first story they were telling. And then Ospreay being the first person to put his name in the hat for the Owen and calling out Texas All In I was then like, oh, okay, that's the guy we're going for. Ospreay versus Moxley feels fresh. But then you hear this promo and you go, oh yeah, this guy is the main character of AEW. And you follow this guy's character arc and his journey from when he was first the champion to now, taking on the evil forces, trying to take down AEW, reclaim that championship. I think it makes so much sense for Hangman Page to win this thing. So I love it. It's put doubt in my mind about the match, which is what I love. I love going into matches really not knowing what the result is going to be. This is essentially the first time these two have ever had a match, and both very rarely have bad matches. So I know this is going to be an incredible match. I think it should main event the show as well. But this got me invigorated again. And I do find it hard to get into AEW in recent time. And this has me very excited for the whole sort of summer's worth of story with Hangman, Ospreay, and wherever we're going with to All Out.
Yeah, there's been a general uptick, I think, of late in AEW. It's a lot of people were soured by the sort of, and still are actually, by the concentration on the Death Rider storyline, which is poison at the moment, and it still is. And sometimes I think you just have to put up with the fact that they've got a plan for that. It probably doesn't culminate until All In, and we're just going to have to wait till July. And then hopefully Moxley will go away for a bit. I think that he needs to at that stage. And just to jump all over the place a little bit, David, I want to just rewind and very, very hard agree on the acting thing, because so says a trained actor in Davie Portman, and so you should know. And sometimes I watch, particularly some of the backstage stuff on NXT week to week, and there's also something about the way those vignettes are filmed that is very pornographic. And I don't necessarily mean
no, I know
parts. I just mean the way it's shot,
cheap and tacky. The way it's filmed, like I 100% agree.
And the acting is absolutely abysmal. So yes, please hire a coach.
Because
this guy,
all these people are natural performers, and so many go on to do acting and actually surprise you and go, oh, these guys are actually pretty good. And I think something that never really gets talked about, and it's something who has done many shows and things in the past. I'm always so impressed how well they remember their lines to start with, and no one ever talks about that. But people come out and talk for 20 minutes at the beginning of these shows, and quite often their scripts have been sort of torn up and handed something else that day. Like that alone, you're memorizing all that stuff and then potentially having a wrestling match on top of it. It's so impressive. But I think you see such a difference with people who have just done anything remotely professional, like Cody, Edge, CM Punk, like all these people who have acted before. It becomes very clear, and Hangman is I put him right up there with them as such a great actor as far as wrestling goes. But yeah, these people, they spend so much time on everything else, and especially in WWE, I'd say it's 75% acting, 25% wrestling. So why are we focusing 80% on wrestling and 20% on promos? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think too with Hangman, Bryan Danielson was in London like a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, for a big boxing match. I'm not that into boxing, so I know it was Eubank and Ben's kids. I'm old enough to remember when those two, their fathers were boxing each other. But he's a boxing fan, so he was over for that. And there was a brief interview I caught with him at the weigh-in where Hangman was one of the people he singled out as like in ring and out of the ring being like really one to watch as a current talent that he really just enjoys. And this was a reminder of that. You've said it all really, Davey, so I won't rehash it, but the promo was completely compelling. I liked the way he dug back into the past. Didn't need to bring everything up, but just to talk about the special hell that those 2 years have been in a very compelling way. And probably a lot of truth, telling in that as well. That really got me on side. And then, like you said, the transition into the confrontation with Ospreay, it reminded me that AEW is perfectly capable of starting a show with a really good talking segment. They don't often do it, but something that will hook you in and get you thinking about, well, what's the outcome of this going to be? And like you said, it's up in the air. There isn't really a firm favorite.
It's as exciting as when AEW first came along and just seeing that quality of wrestling on TV. Like that was so exciting at the beginning, but a lot of people seem to forget all the great, like, just promo segments and stuff we had. And like I remember like AEW was kind of the promo company, because you had your Eddie Kingstons, you had Taz going out there cutting promos, and you had, you know, John Moxley's always been strong with that. There was, and I think especially kind of the CM Punk MJF stuff, that is what gets me invested in the feuds. And yes, I feel now we're so used to seeing great wrestling on TV, that doesn't like ring home as much with me as it used to. But these segments are what are going to sell your pay-per-views and make you want to know what is next in the quote-unquote story. You know, we binge watch TV shows because an episode ends and there's a cliffhanger and you're asking what's happening to this character and what's happening in this storyline and this storyline. And I found too much in the last year or so with AEW. I come out of it and I go, okay, that match was good. And I'm not necessarily itching to know what happens next in the story of these characters. And I found stuff like this and the Hurt Syndicate stuff, I should be coming out of a show questioning things and be like, where do you think this is going? And I think these things would very much had that effect on me this week and made me quite invested in the show.
Definitely. We're a similar kind of fan, I think, in that respect, Davey. Like I need a bit of entertainment. I need a bit of sports entertainment in my wrestling. And even if it's just a physical angle, just something that will keep me compelled in a feud. What's coming next? What's at the high level of the card? What's in the middle? And what are just matches that, and AEW has always done this as well, that they'll just give you a good cold match or two or three on their weekly TV as well. And that's fine. But if that's all they're doing, and it never really has been all they do, but the pendulum has swung a little bit over the years, then that puts it into, for me, the realms of I'm not down on the fans of this, but New Japan, for example, where, and it's probably my fault for not keeping up with it enough, but I don't think there's anything like enough storyline in it to hold my attention. So I'll watch the larger events that they do, particularly Wrestle Kingdom, because I know you're going to get absolute bangers. But that is never enough for me on a week-to-week basis.
Don't need to see the 6 weeks of 6-man tags leading up to it, because yeah, and I think something I really appreciate in current wrestling is just remembering stories and things being just way more logical. And I think the way Hangman kind of put a bow on the Swerve feud for now, being like, essentially like, I get why we both did these things. I will never forget. I will never forgive you, but I need to move on from this. I think it'll build to a great moment down the line when these two eventually have one more match and it's for the title. And I think ending that with a handshake would be such a huge moment, and it'll be such an earned moment that we can now move on. Whereas in a Vince era WWE, these two would be a tag team by now and best friends, and would actually just ignore the fact that they tried to murder each other and burn down houses and that. So I think that's so much better. And that's happening in WWE as well as AEW, just keeping true to the stories and these characters' lives. And that it isn't just a random heel turn. It's a completely justified heel turn. We all know why Drew McIntyre turned heel, because the bloodline kept screwing him over. But he was heel because he was a whiny bitch about it, you know, and that was the quality we didn't like. Everything he was saying was true. And we've seen Swerve be like, I needed to do something to get myself recognized because people like me don't get these opportunities. And it took me invading a man's home for people to look at me. And yes, I regret doing that, but also look what happened. I became a world champion. And on the flip side, Hangman being like, yeah, I burnt down your house, but you invaded my house and stood over my kid. Like, of course I'm going to do that. I really appreciate that kind of storytelling. Some other things on the show I enjoyed. I very much wasn't as high on that 8-man PWG style match last week. I thought it was fun, but it was a little bit too ha-ha for me and my liking.
Okay, yeah.
But I thoroughly enjoyed the 6-man we had this week. A very similar style, like paced match, but I thought just taken a bit more seriously. I got really into this, and I actually really liked the surprise finish with Matt Jackson pinning Swerve.
I do too. I think it was the best match on the show. I'm a sucker for sort of the all-action multi-man matches that the AEW are so good at putting on. I know what you mean about last week. I enjoyed it though.
Yeah, no, most people have, but I don't know. Maybe I was in a bad mood because I was shitting every 10 minutes. But
it could be it, Davey. Yeah, that might be part of it. Yeah. Ring Sting will do that.
Yeah,
but it's I understand your take as well, though. It's just as part of the sort of the variety of everything I'm consuming in the week. I quite liked it as a bit of a change, I guess. But the 6-man from this week was superior, I feel. Yeah, and I too enjoyed the finish. I thought it was sort of out of nowhere and slightly unexpected. What else from Dynamite this week? I don't know that I love the MJF getting into the Hurt Syndicate, and I might be on a little island myself in this one, where other people are really enjoying what they're doing with MJF at the minute. I find this is dragging at this point, but I think he's getting his answer, isn't he? Next week,
he's getting
perhaps?
his answer on Wednesday. Yeah, I like the beatdown of Top Flight. I did find it quite funny because we see this so often in AEW where it's an act who were once hot and then completely forgotten about, and then it's like, oh yeah, we've got Private Party still signed. Let's bring them out for a month. And in this case, I thought they were doing it with Top Flight, where I'm like, ugh, you're really going to try and heat up these guys for a match that I'm not going to be interested in, and then just flipping it with MJF murdering them. Like, doesn't do much for Top Flight stock, bless him, but I don't really care. I'm not the biggest Top Flight fan, so I couldn't really care less. But I liked that with MJF beating them down. I think I've seen a lot of people compare this to Sami Zayn and the Bloodline. I wouldn't, because we know MJF's character and we know he doesn't. Why does he want to be in the Hurt Syndicate? We know he's always thinking ahead. He's always going to turn on these people or whatever. What is his end game? And I think for me, that's what I'm finding compelling with it, because I don't see what the destination is. Yes, we'll have some fun, silly like segments with MJF hanging out with these guys when he's eventually in the group, but we know it's all to stab them in the back. And why is he doing that is kind of my question.
Yeah, he's hinted at them being sort of some alternative means to get to the world title picture instead of the Owen. I think he's mentioned that a couple of times in recent weeks, which doesn't particularly make sense. So that there's, yes, MJF has an ulterior motive for all of this, which is interesting enough. For me, though, the storyline has just been a bit, I just wish they'd gotten there maybe 2 weeks ago or something that. That's all.
The other MJF stuff I've liked, and it also puts doubt in the outcome of the Owen, is the fact he's got like these little mini feuds still going on with both Ospreay and Hangman Page, which leads you to think, especially as you said, it's his way to get to the title. That seems like will be the follow-up from All In. It could even be the All Out match. Although, sorry, things are a bit different this year with the timing of stuff. But whatever the next pay-per-view is coming after All In, could be MJF against either of those guys. And he has history with both. And I just like that he's keeping these feuds like bubbling a little bit under the surface.
Yeah, and they hinted at that on this episode, when they had MJF encounter Ospreay. So yeah, it's plenty of irons in the fire, which is good, I think. The other thing I enjoyed on Wednesday was the angle with Mercedes and
Jamie.
Help me out, Jamie Hayter. Yeah, Jamie's sit down with Renee, sort of spiraling into this. I like a bit of a good old fashioned sort of physical angle to add a bit of steam. Never hurts.
Yeah, I think the match itself is going to be really good. I think Mercedes, it's been a while now that she's been just being very consistent. She had a bit of a shaky start, I thought, in AEW,
sure.
But she's found herself again. And I even think her character work has been a lot better. And I don't think that's ever been her strongest suit, but I feel she feels more comfortable in that skin now. And Jamie Hayter's great. This would mean so much more if they hadn't fumbled Jamie Hayter on her return. Yeah. it should have been, she was injured for a long time. She vacated the title, right? Or no, she was beaten by Tony when she was injured,
that's
but
right.
in like very quick fashion, if I remember correctly. Her whole story should have been from returning, which shouldn't have been done in a pre-show. It should be her chase to try and get that title back. And unfortunately, they're telling this story in about 2 weeks with a character, like we were saying, it's like Tony Khan's gone, oh yeah, I have Jamie Hayter on my roster. That's a fresh match. And I think there could, if you were telling that story for a longer period of time, you could have that sense of doubt where Jamie could win this thing and be facing Toni Storm in All In to get the title from the woman who took it from her originally. And I think that you'd like with the Hangman Ospreay thing, you could see a potential way for both of them to go, but Mercedes has to win this. They're not telling they're not telling that story with Jamie, unfortunately.
I agree with you, Davie, and I know there are a lot of people who actually think Jamie will actually win this and come through. Maybe not a lot, but enough to be sort of like a sizable minority of people who think that this is in doubt. I don't. I still think Mercedes is just winning everything. Even when she loses a title, she's not being pinned, as we saw in the New Japan show the other night. I don't think her first real defeat is going to come this soon.
No, you can always I'd maybe have Jamie go for the title at Forbidden Door. That could be an option, and a rematch against Mercedes if that's the case. But yeah, I think that match would be very strong. I haven't particularly enjoyed the creative. I don't think this. I just see it as a foregone conclusion that it's Mercedes at this point, especially with her already having the match with Athena. I thought that was something you could do in Texas, but we've burnt through that, and Athena's disappeared back to ROH again. Anything else from Dynamite? We had the Okada Kevin Knight match where poor Kevin Knight was just beaten down, and Okada made pretty quick work of him.
Yeah, didn't love that because they've done a really good job with Knight, I think, since his debut, and I think he's gotten over with the crowd. They may well have known him because it's a harder core audience for AEW, generally speaking. But I mean, they've gotten him over very well, and with us at home, I think he's tremendous. Okada, I'm not so high on, because he wrestles so infrequently, and I don't know that his heart is really in the in-ring at the minute. Yeah. I shouldn't sort of try to psychoanalyze the man, but you know what I mean? I don't know. His work rate is not huge.
No, what has his best match been in AEW? The Ospreay one, I guess. But there hasn't been a whole lot of them, and they're going to need to do. We've still got time, but need to do more to make this Kenny Okada thing compelling. The story can't just be these two had really great matches 6 years ago. It needs a bit more than that. And hopefully we'll get there. But yeah, I'm with you with Okada. I don't see that best wrestler in the world in him anymore. And just quite dull. And Kevin Knight has been great. He's been a great addition to the roster. I will say, though, if I was someone like Hologram, who is, 23-0 at this point, Kevin Knight wins 100K in the tag match the other week. The week after winning $100,000, gets put in another match to potentially win $100,000. Right. And then the week after that, gets a Continental Championship match against Okada. If I was Hologram, I'd be like, what more do I have to do here? I've got the best record across the whole roster. You're not giving me opportunities to win 100K. You're not giving me title opportunities.
These are very good points per Hologram. Yeah, he's got that record, and he's not getting
Kevin Knight
money. Never mind title shots.
Definitely lost more than he's won. He's won the crowd, and he's not sort of coming across as a jobber by any means. But his record hasn't been good since coming in. So I don't know. Anything else from AEW this week? There was Collision as well. Did you get to catch any of Collision this week?
I saw some of Collision. I didn't watch it all because I had seen the clip of the Goyen angle with Ricochet, and I thought, all right, well, I have to see this because this looks great.
Yeah.
So I made sure to catch all of that. And God, I just think Ricochet is doing the best stuff of his life at the moment with AEW. And he had a slightly shaky start as well when he first came in. But he's never been the best mic guy. But I think when he found this character, this kind of slightly psychotic, scissor wielding character, he's just since then he's been hitting home runs.
What I really like though is how it's almost retconning, but his shaky start informed the character we've got now. I was definitely higher up on the Hurt Syndicate, just berating him and making him look like an absolute geek than others, because it got this character out of him. It again kind of makes sense. So I've been very high on Ricochet, and if you've heard me on for years on these podcasts, I have not been a fan of him at all, and I think he's doing great work, and got to give him credit there. And yeah, Zach Gowen thing, fuck yeah, let's do it.
It's awesome. Yeah,
it's on Dynamite this week, I think, and I'm very excited for that. That will be a whole lot of fun. And it just shows, just shows how uninterested I am of Death Rider stuff, though, because completely didn't talk about the main event, but it put me to sleep. Samoa Joe, Claudio, I really hated it, to be honest. I find Claudio so fucking boring now.
I'm with you, Davey. It was in my notes, and I just sort of thought, have I anything to say about that? Not really. It's the same old from the Death Rider angle, and in ring, it was what I thought it would be. It was meh.
I found it just I just hate this group. It's just boring, angry men walking around trying to look mean. We've had a few little watch parties at the apartment with friends coming over, and one of our friends likes wrestling but really doesn't know anything that's going on. And whenever Moxley comes out, he's like, "Oh, who's this guy again?" I'm like, "This is the champion." He's like, "Oh, right, this is the angry bloke, what, right?" I'm like, yeah. He's like, "Why is he so angry?" I'm like, I really don't know. He's one of the best paid people in the company. He's the champion. He's got a hot wife. He's got a loving family, and seems to have a lot of friends. He's just hanging out with his friends every day. I really don't know why he's so mad. No. And Claudio just at this point, just coming out looking just boring. And yeah, I thought this was a bit of a stinker, and literally put me to sleep watching it. Anything else from
just to underline, tired as hell of the Death Rider storyline, which no longer makes any sense, as you very clearly laid out there, Davey. When it started, at least Moxley was cutting some sort of promo about wanting to change the company or whatever it was. I forget at this point. Now it's what is his motivation for any of this?
I mean, he kind of started off, it seemed like, those damn millennials, that kind of attitude, wasn't it? People aren't working hard enough. And whereas the last couple of feuds, he's been like, yeah, I respect Swerve. He does work hard. Oh, Samoa Joe, he's a stalwart and all this. And it's, okay, so why are you mad? Why are you mad?
But I'm going to end you anyway. And say,
okay. We had Chris Statlander defeating Willow Nightingale, a bit of an assist from Marina Shafir. So kind of continuing the story where, Chris Statlander just wants to be friends again with Willow, and Willow is obviously cautious about that. And the Marina stuff here is obviously going to play out with Willow still not trusting Statlander. And perhaps that's why, that maybe they're in together or whatever. But I don't know if you've been particularly interested in this story or not that's been going on.
Not especially, I've got to say. I'm aware of it.
We had a pretty good match with Mike Bailey and Dralistico. I enjoyed that on Collision. And then continuation of Daniel Garcia and FTR, who they've been feuding, and Daniel Garcia getting a bit of own back on on FTR there. But I'm not enjoying this FTR Stokely Hathaway pairing. I think it brings FTR right down. I find Stokely a little unbearable now. I don't think he's really elevated anyone he's been with. And it often is just him trying to insert comedy. And I think we started this angle with FTR in such a serious way that now they're just comedic heel characters, which I really don't like.
I still think there's a place for Stokely. He can be genuinely very funny, but it, to me, belongs far better in a backstage skit or a backstage vignette than promos, out in the arena. There's certainly a place for him, but it does feel like a strange fit with FTR, and I'm not really loving their direction in general anyway at the moment. Collision being on a Thursday threw me for a bit of a loop this week. I really haven't caught up with it fully, because quite often it's if I'm not out on a Saturday night, I'll watch it live, and generally quite enjoy it, particularly in recent weeks. But I'm kind of with you on the FTR direction. It's not been very compelling.
I was kind of the other way round. Thursdays I'm often home, so I liked it. I don't watch TNA, and that's the only thing on Thursday wrestling wise. So it kind of, I was like, oh yeah, I've got Collision tonight. So I enjoyed it, and a couple of weeks in a row I've been able to watch it because I was obviously sick the week before. So Collision is an enjoyable show. I think it is a fun 2 hours. It's certainly not Dynamite. It definitely does feel like the B-level show. But they have started doing a few more stories going on. We've had a lot of the Tony Storm stuff. We've had the FTR story going on as well, and Daniel Garcia. And some good matches. I enjoyed Collision this week.
And we got a bit of physicality with Nigel, didn't we, at the end of the
yes,
show?
That's right.
That's interesting.
Do you see him? I mean, he wrestled 2 matches last year, I believe. So I assume possibly going to get involved in this FTR stuff as well.
It looks that way. I can't imagine they would have done what they did without some direction in mind. And I guess it's a long way off, though. I was thinking of, the next time they're back in Britain is Forbidden Door, or perhaps some television in Scotland before Forbidden Door, but that's not until the bank holiday weekend in August. That's a really long way off. And I could see Nigel getting back into the ring at that point, but it's so far away that it's clearly not going to be in any part of this storyline. So
no, and I think we'll be getting to Edge and Christian against FTR for All In. Yeah. So we'd have already moved on from this Garcia thing by that point anyway. Yeah. Well, I think that brings us to an end of Wrestling Chat this week. Got through a lot. Sabu, Backlash, AEW. There was the Maple Leaf Pro show that happened last night. Braden Harrington was able to attend it. I have not caught any of this yet, but he said the Gabe Kidd, Michael Oku, and Speedball match, I believe it was very good. So maybe a little recommendation there to go and check that one out. I'll be going to Demand Lucha this Wednesday at the Phoenix. So if you are in the Toronto area, it's going to be a great show. They always put on bangers of shows. So if you are in the area, get your tickets, search for Demand Lucha on Google, and get some tickets for this Wednesday at the Phoenix. A bit of an iconic venue here in the 6. So I'll see you there. And I'll be back Tuesday with Up Next on the Post Wrestling feed, talking all about NXT. We'll have our NXT TakeOver review coming out on the Patreon this week, and we'll be back next Sunday at 2 p.m. on this very feed with Braden back in the chair for a brand new episode of Poisonrana. Neal, I want to say thank you very much for joining me today and keeping this show alive. Do you have any final thoughts, words, or promotion you'd like to put out before we go off air?
Just thanks very much for having me, Davey. It's nice when I get to do a podcast in a kind of normal
time,
in my time zone, in a normal time. While I am a bit of a night owl, generally speaking, anyway, particularly on weekends. So it's not a great hardship, but oftentimes if I'm stepping in on a Friday night for Rewind to SmackDown, that's starting at 4 a.m. for me. That's when SmackDown finishes and the podcast begins. I put out something for the wellness policy that I think is coming up on Tuesday, the 20th of May. And it will be our return to the wellness policy. That's a post-wrestling show that's free to everybody on the post-wrestling YouTube channel. We didn't do one in April because of Way's parental absence, so we'll want to catch up with Way about how things are going with his expanded family, and
of course,
I'll be talking about my life, and Jordan will be talking about his life, and those sorts of things, and we'll hopefully take some calls as well. But that's our show. That's kind of a non-wrestling hangout where we talk about our lives, and we sometimes have a topic, we sometimes don't. More often than not, we don't these days. Just callers can call in with whatever they're feeling, and we've got a qualified psychotherapist in the form of Jordan Goodman there to keep you on the straight and narrow.
I love those shows. I'm a fan of the shows where I often think the wrestling gets in the way. I just want to hear people hang out and chat, and I find it very interesting. And you guys have great chemistry, the three of you, all three of you, very, very different people, I feel. So, definitely. And I think that's why it really works with you guys.
Thanks, Davie. Appreciate it.
Well, that brings us to an end. Thank you very much, guys. Go Leafs, go. Happy Mother's Day, and rest in peace, Sabu. Ahoy!